Counsel here at Mass. I'm our general counsel here at Mass Office on Disability. I'm here today with my colleague, Robert Dias, who is our Assistive Technology Information Specialist. And we are going to talk today about digital accessibility. This is going to be a pretty high level overview of what you're going to want to think about with digital accessibility for specific types of documents. I'm going to try to get through our overview pretty quickly so that we can delve into people's questions at the end, because I think a lot of this, it can be kind of specific to questions that that you guys might have. So we'll start with a nice general overview, and then we are happy to answer questions at the end. You also should have received a copy of this slide deck and a list of helpful resources that we have identified prior to this meeting. So hopefully those will get you started as well. So first, I want to talk about why do digital resources need to be accessible? The general principle under the ADA is that places of public accommodation and services provided by state and local governments must be accessible to people with disabilities. And for a long time, this has meant that places of public accommodation and state and local governments need to provide adequate communication access. And that can come in a variety of ways. And one of those ways is to make sure that the digital offerings that you have, your website, digital flyers, materials that you provide to people are accessible, right? We haven't gotten a lot of guidance, though, from the federal government, from the DOJ, on what exactly these entities' obligations are with respect to websites and other digital resources until this year. And there is a link to this in that resource packet that we handed out earlier. The DOJ this year clarified that both Title II and Title III of the ADA, so that's Title II is the title covering state and local government services. Title III covers public accommodations, do require that covered entities make their websites accessible, because those websites are an extension of either the state and local government service or the place of public accommodation. The DOJ doesn't give a specific standard that you have to meet, but the guidance does point to these WCAG standards as really helpful standards to use. They kind of hint that that might be a standard that they would adopt going forward, but they don't give us a bright line rule about what they mean when they say accessible. Really what they're talking about is, I think, usability for people with different disabilities, and making sure that people with different disabilities who use technology in different ways are going to have access. And there's different ways that you can approach providing that access, and those are the strategies are what we're going to really focus on today. So we're going to start with websites, because that was the subject of the DOJ guidance. And we're going to talk about WCAG, the WCAG standards, which are these worldwide standards, international standards for website design around accessibility. We think they're a good guideline to use. The latest version of the WCAG standard is 2.1. That is the accessibility standard that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has adopted internally. So all Commonwealth resources must meet that standard. It's a really good guideline to use, and it's a good way to, the standards are a good way to go through and check that your website, your resource is accessible. WCAG standards are really guided by 4 principles, making sure that the information you are presenting is perceivable by users. So it's being presented to people in a way that they can perceive, either that, and perception is going to vary based on people's disabilities. So it might mean that it will be read aloud as text, that text will be read aloud. It might mean that so visual content would be read aloud. It might be that oral content is presented visually. It has to be perceivable by the person who's using it. It also has to be operable. So the interface components, the user interface components of your system, the navigation components of your system, need to be operable by people with disabilities who are going to use technology in different ways. So you need to think about how, are people using a mouse? Are people using keyboard only? Are they using touch screens? What kind of method are they using for operating their technology here? And make sure that it's accessible on a variety of different different components. So you also need to make sure that the information that you're presenting is understandable. This can mean that it's presented in plain language so that people can easily understand the information that you're trying to convey. And then finally, the content should be robust enough that it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of people, and including people who are using assistive technologies, and that assistive technologies are going to effectively interface with your website, and that they aren't going to sort of be tripped up by the way that your website or your platform is designed. So that's sort of the foundational principles behind WCAG. The WCAG standards are many, and so we aren't going to go over them in detail right now. There's a link to them in the resource sheet, and they're a really good guideline to use when you're thinking about whether or not your website, your web-based platform is accessible. When we're talking about written documents like a Word document, and this applies to any word processing platform, we're going to focus on Word because it's one that's very commonly used in office settings. But these principles apply to any word processing platform. When you're using Microsoft Word, you want to organize your documents using the headings feature of Microsoft Word, because people who use screen readers can use those headings to effectively navigate the document. If you just have the entire document written in the paragraph style of text, or the normal style of text, you're going to lose the ability for your users who use screen readers are going to lose the ability to effectively navigate that document. So you want to use headings. You want to make sure that the headings that you're using are concise and relevant. So don't have a heading that's an entire paragraph long. That's going to take away from the usefulness of the headings as a navigational tool. Use alternative text for images. It's pretty easy to add. You really just right click on the image and you can add alternative text. Any visual material in your Word document needs to have alternative text. It might be decorative, and if it's just decorative and it doesn't add content to the document, you can mark it as decorative. But always add alternative text to your images so that people know that either they're not missing anything because it's decorative, or they know what the image is. I'm going to try to make that alternative text meaningful, and not just the file name of the image that you dropped in. Use meaningful text to label hyperlinks instead of just dropping a really long, complicated hyperlink into your text. Make a hyperlink that's descriptive of what you're linking to. So for example, I would put MOD website and hyperlink that instead of writing out www.mass.gov/MOD. It's more concise, it's easier to read, and it's going to make your document more accessible, more usable for folks. When you're using tables in Microsoft Office documents, this can really trip up a screen reader. So it's important that you use simple table structures. Avoid splitting and merging cells because that's going to make it harder for someone who uses a screen reader to follow what's happening in the table. And make sure that you're identifying the column headings in the tables so that the content of the tables makes sense to someone who's using a screen reader to read that table. When you are adding objects such as tables or images to your Word documents, format them so that they're in line with the text instead of sitting over the text. That is going to make it much smoother to read when you're using a screen reader as well. And happily for us, Microsoft Office has a pretty good accessibility checker. Depending on the version of Office that you have, it might be a little bit different, but all of the newer versions of Word have an accessibility checker, and you should use it as sort of a first line of defense when you are creating a Word document, because it's going to point out any really obvious flags in your document. So when you're making a PowerPoint, and to be totally honest, Rob had to help me with my PowerPoint for this presentation. So this is a learning curve for everyone. When you're making PowerPoint documents accessible, you want to use unique titles for every slide. So you'll notice up at the top of this slide here, we have the title, How to Make PowerPoint Documents Accessible. We had a different title on the last slide, which was How to Make Word Documents Accessible. And the next slide I'll preview is How to Make PDFs Accessible. The reason that you do that is that, again, it's going to help someone who uses a screen reader more easily navigate the document and get to the slide that has the content that they're looking for. If every slide has the same title, they're going to have a harder time navigating the document to find the content that they're looking for. Use image and audio descriptions. If you again have images in your PowerPoint slide, a lot of people like to use images in their PowerPoint slides, and if those images, especially if they're adding to the content, you need to make sure that there is alternative text. On our slides, we have up at the top, we have the state seal, and we have this blue bar with a little picture of the State House. Those are all marked as decorative for most of the pages of my presentation. You'll notice on the first page of this PowerPoint deck, that little state seal has alternative text, so that folks using a screen reader will know, all right, so it's that alternative text that's marked, it's that state seal that's marked as decorative on the rest of the pages. If you have a lot of shapes, images, items, like kind of crowding in your slide, it can be really helpful to group those images together into one image and then use alternative text to label all of the images together. It can make it a lot less busy for a screen reader user when you do that. And if folks have questions about how to do that, Rob is good at that. I'm pretty bad at it, but basically what you do is you're going to turn those images into one object and then just label that one object so that it's easier, it's a better flow when someone using a screen reader is using the document. It's also important to use high contrast color schemes. A lot of the default color schemes in PowerPoint are going to be high contrast, which is great, but you need to be careful because some of them aren't, and some of the parts of some of them aren't. So you want to have high contrast, so black and white is really good, yellow and blue and dark blue is fine because there's enough contrast there. But make sure that there's enough contrast on the screen so that it's easy to read. This is my my biggest error. Make sure that there are no errant bullet points. For some reason in PowerPoint, often you'll find a little ghost bullet point at the end of your list, and people who are sighted can't see that little errant bullet, because in PowerPoint, if there isn't text on a bullet line, the bullet doesn't appear. But for some reason, JAWS, the screen reader, picks up that bullet and will write and will say bullet, and that can be kind of confusing. So make sure that at the end of your list, you are doing a hard delete so that there isn't a stray bullet lingering at the bottom of your page. That's not, the most important thing, but it's irritating, and it's a mistake I always make, so I wanted to include that here. More important, you should check the reading order of your slides. There's a function within PowerPoint that will do a reading order check and will let you move around the reading order of the different objects on a certain slide. And again, PowerPoint has an excellent accessibility checker. Use it every time you're putting together a presentation. Sometimes it won't pick up if your master slides have missed alternative text, but it'll pick up if you miss putting alternative text on an image that's in your slide. It'll check the reading order of your slide. It'll check to make sure that you have unique titles. So a lot of these things, these pointers in here will be flagged by the accessibility checker if you use that. So definitely use that tool. It's really helpful. So now we're going to talk about how to make PDFs accessible. A lot of people use PDFs. I know I'm a lawyer and I love to turn things into PDFs so that people can't change them after I've sent them out. So we use a lot of PDFs, but PDFs can be really inaccessible depending on how they're put together. So you want to make sure that if you're converting a document such as a Word document or a PowerPoint to PDF, that you're making that native document as accessible as possible so that that accessibility will carry over as much as you can into the PDF version. When you are making the PDF, when you're turning, say, a Word document into a PDF, you're going to have much better success in preserving those accessibility features on the native document if you save the document to PDF rather than printing it to PDF. More of that metadata around formatting is going to carry over if it's saved rather than printed. The worst thing you can do is print out a document, scan it back in, and then turn that into a PDF. That is going to be really hard to make accessible because the scanned image is going to appear as an image, and you're going to have to make sure that the text is then OCR'd so that a screen reader can pick up on the text. So make sure that if you are scanning a document that you're going to provide to someone as a PDF, that you are using the OCR feature in Adobe, you need Adobe Pro, I think, to do that, so that the text can be read by a screen reader and that the document isn't appearing entirely as an image. It's also really helpful to set the document language so that the screen reader knows what language to read the document. Again, it's incredibly important to add alternative text to any images. You should also make sure that the document is tagged. That is going to help someone navigate the document. And it honestly, it helps everyone navigate a document when it's tagged. So you can tag a document, tag the different sections of a document so that it's easier to navigate to the precise section that you want to go to and get that exact information that you're looking for. Just as you would in PowerPoint, you want to check the reading order of the document to make sure that the different elements are reading in the order that you intend them to be read. And those are our main hot tips for PDFs. We're breezing through this so that we can get to your questions at the end. So hopefully I'm not going too fast. It's also really important that our web-based meetings and the video content that we share is accessible. I kind of put these together because oftentimes, like today, we're recording the meetings that we can put on our website later. So considerations that you want to have when you are hosting a web-based meeting or putting a video on your website, include the ADA coordinator's contact information on meeting invitations or notices. Consider what accessibility features are available with your chosen platform. Zoom, Teams, WebEx, they all have accessibility features, but sometimes they are operated a little bit differently. Some might be easier to use for some people rather than others. So think about what features your audience might need and when you're deciding which platform to use. If you're using ASL interpreters, if we don't have one here today, but if you're using an ASL interpreter, make sure that they are spotlighted so that they're visible to all participants in the meeting. Zoom has a really cool new feature that allows folks who use ASL interpreters to pop that screen out, which is kind of cool. So that you can resize it, move it around, kind of handy. If you're moderating a meeting, make sure that you have a plan for how you're going to call on people who can't use the chat feature or the hand raise feature. That might not be very accessible to some people because of their disability. You need to have a plan for how you're going to tackle that. Today we have two options. We have the Q&A and the chat option, and we also have a hand raise option if you can't use that chat option. And we have, Lilia here helping me moderate the meeting so that, we've got someone who has an eye on what's going on in the meeting and what people might need. If you are presenting visual material, make sure that you're describing it verbally. I don't have a lot of images in my PowerPoints on purpose, but if I had a graph, or if I had an image on my PowerPoint that I was showing to the meeting, it would be important that I verbally describe that image or verbally describe that graph so that all participants of the meeting have equal access to that visual content. And then when you're sharing a video, either in a meeting or sharing a video on your website, make sure that that video includes captioning, make sure that it includes alternative text for images, make sure that it includes audio description, and you know, add an ASL interpreter where you can, because all of those things are going to make your video more accessible to people with disabilities. Sometimes it's not going to be feasible to do all of these things, but the more of them that you can add to your video, the more accessible that video is going to be to members of the public. So some things to keep in mind. All right, and then finally, then we're going to get to questions. I want to make sure we have lots of time for questions. What are you know, how are you going to sort of achieve digital accessibility? You can do it on your own. You know, we gave you some tools today, some basic high-level tools today to help you make documents and such more accessible. But hiring an expert is a really good investment. These are federal obligations that you have to make your digital content accessible. And hiring an expert to do an audit, to do accessibility consulting for you is going to protect your agency or your business from potential liability. And it's going to help you serve your constituents or your customers better. So I think it's always a great idea to hire an accessibility audit service or consulting vendor. How do you do that? You can Google it. You know, you can Google accessibility audit services, accessibility consulting services, and you'll find a lot of entities that are doing that now. If you are a state or local government entity, you can use the Commonwealth statewide contract for accessibility auditing services. If you're a state entity, you have to use it. If you're a local government, you can use it. But if you're not a local government or a state government, and you want to get some ideas about who a good vendor might be, you can go to our statewide contract, and you can find it by Googling Commonwealth of Massachusetts ITS 61. And you can look at the list of vendors, and you'll know that those vendors have all been pre-vetted by the Commonwealth, and those are people that the Commonwealth has worked with before. So we can't endorse specific vendors, but that's a place that you might get some ideas. If you're a state and local government service, you can get some good rates by going to those vendors. So definitely something to check out. I also wanted to put a plug in because I know there are some folks on the call today from local governments. Cities and towns in Massachusetts can apply for MOD's Municipal ADA Improvement Grant Program to pay for improvements to town websites or town web platforms. Maybe you have a town permitting platform or a town, you know, a web program that you use to collect taxes or to collect parking fines. If you need an audit of your website or one of those platforms, you can ask us for funding for those accessibility audit services for those different programs. So definitely think about that. This year's grant round is closed, and we'll be awarding the grant soon, but the new grant year will begin in August. So you have, you know, the next 9 months or so to think about what you might want to ask for in order to improve your local website or your local digital platform. So I am going to open it up for questions now. Lily, it looks like we've got some questions waiting for us.
Yeah, we've only got a couple, so the rest of the time here is reserved for your questions. So please, again, the chat is turned off for attendees, but you can submit your questions in the Q&A, and I'll read them there, or you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. And also, if you have anything to add to our answers, or you have advice to give or follow-up questions, then please submit those as well. So I will start with our first question. Can I contact MOD if I need troubleshooting help? This looks challenging.
So we gave you a lot of resources in the handout. My favorite resources are Minnesota's quick cards, I think they're called, that are really helpful sort of checklists about what to look for when you are checking a document for accessibility. We also included some links to training videos in there. If you are a state agency, we can provide you with technical assistance, and you can email us at mod-digitalaccess@mass.gov. So if you're a state agency, if you're a municipality, feel free to email us and we can provide you with some technical assistance. Private companies and sort of general members of the public, we can't provide that level of service. We just don't have the internal resources, but we did give you a lot of really good resources in that handout that you got by email earlier. So those should get you started. There's some really good videos in there too, if you're a person that likes to use videos. And if you have a specific sort of task that you want to execute, we can do a screen share too, right? We have a lot of time. So if you have a specific thing that you want to see, we could demo it too.
And Julie, I just want to chime in because I know we have folks from other states here. That's specific to Commonwealth.
Yes,
agencies.
Commonwealth agencies.
Yeah.
Can you give some examples of some of the support you've been able to provide through that, like some of the projects you've worked on?
Yeah, Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So hello, everyone. I'm Rob. I'm a screen reader user here. So I've been fortunate enough throughout my time here at MOD, which has been 13 years, and more recently over the past year exclusively been working with some of our sister agencies in reviewing some of their digital content to see how usable and accessible they are from a user perspective. So I don't take on projects as this is a violation or this is not a violation. I generally help them with the user experience. So through some of our screen share sessions over the pandemic, it's been a really great opportunity for me to sit with some developers, some e-learning trainers, some people who are mitigating PDFs or Word documents, to work with them in real time and to help them make their digital content a bit more accessible. In real time, that's more likely to be done with documents. So I'm able to read a PDF and look at the tag structure of that PDF and teach those folks, hey, something's not being read correctly. Can we retag it this way? And working with them. So I don't know if I want to provide specific projects, but we have a Commonwealth learning management system. I've been able to work with our sister agencies with that, performance management systems. So it sort of runs the gamut of different types of digital content.
Great, thank you, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question, we've got someone looking to connect. Is anyone using Captivate to author e-learning tools and wanting to connect or network with others? I'm new at MDPH and looking to share ideas about making modules accessible. So I don't know if either one of you has used Captivate before.
So there's a lot of those e-learning tools out there. So I'm not usually the person on the admin side using those authoring tools. So I'm dealing more on the output. So my suggestion would be, looking at the vendor's documentation of the product to see what accessibility tools they've built into it. But oftentimes with e-learning, sort of the same principles apply to some of the stuff that Julia was reviewing with the documents, right? You want to make sure that your reading order and tab order is set. You want to make sure that images have appropriate alternative text. You want to make sure that any, Q&A function is, tabbable with the keyboard and being read by screen readers. But right now, I don't know off the top of my head how Captivate's renders e-learning. I've dealt with Captivate, with Rise, with Lectora. I've been on the receiving end of a lot of those e-learning courses that have been produced with those products. So my suggestion would be looking at the Captivate website specific to accessibility.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to leave that in the Q&A so folks can comment on that question if you have anything to add, or raise your hand and I can call on you. Next is a comment. Hi, I work in the web services group for EOE. We tell our content writers to not group images and objects in Microsoft Word because in our research, we learned that adding alt text to the group is not accessible. Microsoft Office support has this suggestion instead. This is a quote from Microsoft. Instead of grouping objects in a diagram, flatten the diagram into a picture and add alt text to the picture. If you group the objects, the child objects are still in the tablet.
Yeah, I think, and I can't remember if Julia had mentioned it, but in the PowerPoint and Word, any objects that you have that are floating, or even if there are a lot of objects kind of pointing to the same thing, group them, right-click, save it as an image, and post that as one clean image. So I think we're sort of saying the same thing in that regard, but I'm happy to learn new, better ways to do things. So thanks.
Thank you. We've got one more here, but keep the questions coming. We've got plenty of time left. What are the best practices for alt text? How detailed do I need to be?
Oh, well, so alternative text is an art form, but the general rule of thumb is, especially if you're the content author and content creator, is you kind of want to focus on what's the purpose of providing this picture to the user. So what is it that you want the user to, and you can look at this from a visual perspective. You're providing an image to your users, and what is it that you want them to focus on that image? So, as an example, if we're talking about a document and we're talking about, let's say, a watch or a necklace, and we provide a picture of someone, let's say, I'm going to use Julia as an example. We put a picture of Julia with her watch on, pointing to it. You don't necessarily need to describe what Julia looks like in great detail, but you do want to mention, who it is and kind of what they're doing. So if they're pointing or holding up their watch and have a huge smiling on their face, that's sort of the purpose of that photo, is you're talking about the watch and you're showing someone who's very enthusiastic about this new watch that they got. So you don't have to be bogged down with describing the scenery, but you want to, again, focus on the purpose and the intention of showing that photo.
Great, thank you. So I think it might be helpful to do a little demo. Rob, do you have anything ready so you could share your screen and show people? That might be some questions.
Well, I can get it. Are we sure there's no other questions before I kind of look for a document and do a demo?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any now. I'm thinking maybe if we show people, then some questions might come up. But I'm keeping an eye on it. So yeah, if you have any more, please do submit those in the Q&A or raise your hand.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, so let me see. So oftentimes I, dealing with Word or PDFs or PowerPoints, sometimes I'm better working in those programs than others. It just depends on, you know, how long it's been since I've really kind of gone in and had to like mitigate things. So what I'm pulling up right now is a document that is going to highlight the importance of headings. So let me just make sure that I'm closing out of my other windows. Okay, I'm just making sure. Okay. Okay. Let me see if I can share my screen. I'm going to share my sound.
Toolbar parent WMD meeting controls.
Okay, and
Headings practice original docs dash word. To move to an item, press the arrow keys. Headings practice.
can folks hear and see my screen?
Read the content below.
Okay. So let's talk about the importance of headings for now. So I think Julia had mentioned it more than once that you know, headings are a real important way for you to build into your documents or websites. One as sort of a navigational point for individuals that use assistive technologies or screen readers. And two, that they also can pass along, you know, the information and relationship of the content that you're presenting. So right now I have a document that has visual headings. So as I, and excuse me, I don't use a mouse. So let me scroll through the page with the keyboard.
Have seemed as improbable as you. Page 2. Unleashed these popular
Okay,
and economically expensive.
so I'm just scrolling
Local
through
political
this so you can kind of
Page
see
3. Colonial Assembly. Page 9. Great Awakening M dash.
that this text is formatted in a way where your eyes are drawn to certain sections of this document because these headings are used as, you know, as they should be visually, right? They're introducing succeeding sections of text, right? And some of the major sections are denoted by bigger font, boldness, maybe a certain color, and subsections are denoted by, you know, smaller font, maybe indented in, maybe with italics, but visually you can tell that this document is structured in a way where you want your users to quickly be able to scan this document and get an understanding of what this, what type of information this document contains, and if they're, you know, want to read a particular section, they can quickly scan it. So as a screen reader user,
Page 1. Top of file.
you know, one of the main ways that, you know, users navigate their document is by, you know, using a combination of their keyboard and taking that blinking cursor that you see there and basically having it read the text line by line. You know, you can have it read kind of all at once where you just hit a key command and sit back and listen to. So I'm just going to give you a flavor of what it sort of sounds like. So I'm just going to down arrow.
Treat the content below these instructions as a separate document. Edit the following content to ensure that all headings are
I'm going to slow my speech because I recognize that that's probably too fast for most folks.
faster, faster, slower, 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 slower.
Okay. And I'm going to down arrow here.
Above the examples, heading 1. The textbook HTTP
Okay, so hopefully you can see my cursor moving.
blank, blank, the American Revolution.
And then it's reading this.
Introduction.
So
And the 7.
I can tell as a screen reader user that although there are visual headings here, there was no indication to me that there were headings. And I have the ability to pull up a headings list.
There are no headings in this document.
And it tells me that there are no headings in this document. So assistive technology cannot infer meaning from visual formatting alone. So what that means is that although the font style is set, the boldness, the font of the size of the font, I have to purposely seek out that information. And that would require me to either change my speech synthesizer or go line by line and hear what the font size is. So what we want to do in Word specifically is we want to take that bolded font, the visual headings, and we want to use Microsoft's built-in styles to designate those as headings. That way, that heading structure, that semantic structure gets passed along to the assistive technology user. So what you can do if you get a document like this and you don't have the benefit of reading or having a screen reader to see if there are headings here, you can see that they're visually, but how do you tell? One way to do that is to go to Microsoft's View menu.
Upper ribbon, View tab, 10 of 13.
And you want to enable the navigation pane.
Leaving menus, comment, interact, menu, share sub, upper ribbon, print layout
And
button.
again, I apologize, I forget what the shortcut
Web
key
layout
is.
button, not outline button, draft button, immersive, dark mode, page move, side to show, grid lines checkbox, navigation pane checkbox not checked, alt followed by space, leaving
So
menus,
once I
leaving
check
ribbons,
this,
edit, navigation, search document,
you can see that there
search
is
split button, headings tab, 1 of
a
3,
headings
the switch
tab,
page.
and there are no headings in this document. So how do we build these headings?
Search document edit.
So what we want to do
F6,
is,
status.
again, we're looking at the styles menu in Word, and we're going to designate that text as headings.
Top of.
So let me figure out what I want my first heading to be in this document.
Word count, spelling and.
So let me get
Shift F6, navigations, Shift F6, headings practice or treat the content below these.
So it says treat the content below.
Content above the text, blank, the American Revolution.
Okay, so I know this document. I know that this American Revolution is the title of this document. So I want to mark this as a heading 1. So I'm going to highlight the text.
Home, selected, the American.
I'm going to go into my home menu.
Upper ribbon, view tab, 10 of 30. Review tab, mailing, references, layout tab, design tab, 5 of 13.
Again,
draw
sorry,
tab,
I'm
home tab, 2.
There we go.
Can't undo split button on the upper ribbon, home, clip, font combo box, paragraph, bullets, menu, styles group, styles.
Okay, so I'm going to open up this styles group.
Alt down arrow, leaving menus, table, styles table. No spacing, but heading 1 button, heading.
And as you see, I have heading 1,
heading 2 button,
heading 2, heading 3.
heading 1 button.
So I want to designate this as a heading 1. So a couple of things. If I just hit enter on this or double click on this with the mouse, it's going to apply the default heading style that this template has. You can modify the style by right clicking on it and picking modify. But since this is already visually formatted the way I would like, I'm going to right click on this.
Applications, update heading 1 to match selection.
And I'm going to select update heading 1 to match selection. Basically, that's just a fancy way of saying, I like this font style and I want all of my heading 1s in the document, if I have more than one, to look and feel this way. So I'm going to hit enter on that.
Enter, leaving menus, leaving ribbons, Microsoft Word document, edit.
So
blank, heading level 1, the American.
Now that's a heading 1. I can pull up my headings list.
Heading list dialog, headings list view, the American.
It's there,
Escape.
and hopefully you're seeing that heading structure built out. So what you want to do is go through the rest of the document and assign the subheadings and the sub of subheadings. You want to assign them with the appropriate heading levels. So headings should be organized in a way that you're preserving the parent-child relationship of those headings. So you want to take all these major sections, and you want to mark the major sections as heading 2s, right? Because they're a sub or a child of the main heading, which is the heading 1. And then any subsections of those major sections, you want to mark as heading 3s, and then so on if those heading 3s have children. So I'm not going to painstakingly go through all of this right now, but if this was structured appropriately with the appropriate heading structure, I could pull up a headings list. I could hear what the headings are on the page. If they're nested appropriately, meaning the appropriate heading level is assigned, I will be able to hear what that heading level is and understand how the information relates to each other. So, whether or not, a section is a child of a parent section. And then another neat feature is, and I sort of forgot where it is, I believe it's in the reference in Word, is once you build out the heading structure, you can take that heading structure and build a table of contents out of it. And I believe that's done through the References tab. And as your headings shift and move through the document, you can update that table of contents. So if one heading gets moved from page 2 to page 3, you can simply update it, and then it'll Word will automatically build in that table of contents with the appropriate page. So, so that's sort of it for headings.
1:51 p.m.
We're at 1:51, so I'm happy to answer any questions about this or anything else. Let me get back to Zoom.
Meeting controls.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I think it's always helpful to be able to get an example like that. So we did have one question come up. In a document that may be shared electronically and or printed, is there a best practice in how to format website? So hyperlinks. I noticed that in this document, Rob's screen reader was reading the link letter by letter.
Yeah, so I would say if for you know, printed materials that you absolutely need the URL so people can get to it, there's a couple of different ways you can attack that, right? You can have a more descriptive link on the page that says visit MOD's website, which is, you know, you're having the MOD website as the hyperlink text. And in parentheses in static text, you can include the actual URL. So http:// you know, you just don't want, you want to kind of avoid those lengthy text as the hyperlink, because users can pull up lists of links and then they have to weed through all that extra verbiage of http://www.mass.gov/mod/service details, you know, whatever it may be. Or you could decide to maybe, you know, you have the descriptive link in the Word document. You could decide to have like a footer or something at the end of the document that includes all the URLs kind of as a footnote. So you can use the footnote feature in Word to footnote the URL, that the descriptive link text, and then a footnote with the actual URL. And again, that's you know, for printing purposes, so someone is looking at it, doesn't have the benefit of using their finger and clicking on a link. You know, you can provide that in creative ways. So there's not a prohibition to provide the long link text, but you as static, but you just want to make sure that that's not the actual link text, because again, users may simply navigate by links. You want to avoid ambiguous links, avoid kind of click here. You want to make sure that links that are named the same are pointing to the same location. So you wouldn't want something that says click here, click here, click here, that are 3 different links and they're going to 3 different locations.
Thank you. And we've got one more question. If someone cannot access the chat in real time, and so in a virtual meeting, and there are documents shared during a web meeting, gathering email addresses is one option, but assuming this might not be feasible in the moment to collect, do you have suggestions on how to support participants through this if they can't access the chat?
Well, I'm assuming you're talking about access the chat like from an accessible point of view, not because the chat is sort of not enabled. You know, I would say that's sort of the importance of having the accessibility statement in terms of to request an accommodation. So if you need materials sort of in advance or post meeting, you know, you want to make sure that you're alerting the ADA coordinator or whomever is the designee that deals with accommodations to let them know what your unique needs are. And then I always think it's sort of a best practice as a follow-up, which we try to do, is we try to collect, you know, any relevant links that were shared in the chat, any documents, and we try to send that out with a post meeting, you know, email blast, just as a review. Lilia, did you want to add to that? I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that.
I don't think so. Just, yeah, I think the better planning you can do in advance, the better. So, you know, ideally you are sending out materials ahead of time as well. I think that can be helpful.
And I think that it is helpful to try as best you can to gather email addresses of attendees so that you can follow up if documents are shared live during the meeting. It can be helpful for accessibility reasons to turn off the chat feature in a big Zoom meeting so that it doesn't become distracting and that there isn't a lot of content being shared in that chat, so that you, the meeting organizer, is kind of exerting more control over what's shared and how. But I would say that Rob is absolutely right, that making sure that folks know ahead of time how to ask for what they need from the ADA coordinator or the event organizer is really important for accessibility.
So thank you, everyone. I think that's it for questions. So we will be emailing all attendees with the slides and the handout from today. If you do have feedback for us, please put the email in the chat, and you'll get an email from me as well with this, but that can be sent to mod-communications@mass.gov. Anything else you all want to add?
Well, if we have any sister agencies here that may want to do a screen share or have a follow-up or just a quick review on some things that they're creating or building or procuring, please use MOD as a resource. You can email our digital access mailbox at mod-digitalaccess@mass.gov. I think that's it, right, Julia?
Yeah, that's it.
All right, great. Ooh, I remember.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.